Before the memory of kings, the earth was young and wide. Mountains exhaled fire, and seas wandered without shore. Through mists of creation strode beings vast and solemn, their shapes half shadow, half light. They raised mountains as monuments to silence, and walked between storms as shepherds of thunder. Their reign left no scripture, only the hush that follows something too immense to name. They were the architects of beginnings, the first rhythm in the song of stone. Their touch shaped valleys, their breath stirred the tides. We find their echoes in the bones of mountains, their absence in the trembling of the earth. Even now, the wind that moves through deserts seems to remember them, whispering in languages long since turned to dust. They shared knowledge with the newborn race that watched them in awe, how to harvest flame, how to read the stars, how to dream beyond fear. Yet wisdom, once kindled, hungers for more. The small ones learned to build, to rule, to claim. The giants, seeing reflection in their pupils, grew restless. Pride coiled around creation like soak before the rain. Then the harmony of heaven and earth fractured. Skies bruised with warning, oceans strained against their beds. The great ones looked upward, hearing judgment in the thunder. When the waters came, they did not flee. They stood and faced the deluge like statues in mourning. The sea swallowed their echoes, and the world began again, emptier, smaller, but newly awake. When the waters receded, humankind rose among their ruins. The giants were gone, but the land still bore their fingerprints. Terraces cut into mountains, stones balanced against gravity's will. In every dawn fire, survivors told of luminous beings lost to wrath, of builders whose shadows had touched the stars. Memory became a refuge, myth the cradle of understanding. Across the sands of ages, their legend splintered into tongues and temples. In one land, they were titans bound beneath rock. In another, mountain spirits who shaped rivers with their hands. The names changed, but the longing endured. Humanity, haunted by scale, built monuments to mimic them, pyramids for their height, ziggurats for their pride, cathedrals for their silence. The old stones remain, patient and unspeaking. We measure them with instruments and theories, but none explain the feeling they awaken, the sense of standing within a memory older than humanity itself. Some say the earth hums where their hearts once beat. Others claim the stars drift in patterns shaped by their forgotten hands. Perhaps they were not gods nor beasts, but something between. The earth dreaming itself alive for a moment, too brief to endure. Their passing left a hunger in the human soul, an ache for magnitude. Every tale since has been an echo of that ache, an attempt to give language to wonder and reason to the unreasonably vast. But myths have long shadows. Beneath their beauty lies unease, a suspicion that what we call story might be remembrance. Somewhere, beneath rock and root, there may yet rest bones too large for measure. The earth keeps its secrets well, and time is a faithful warden. Still, now and then, it lets a whisper slip through stone. Thus ended the age of Titans, though ended is not the right word. They sleep in the marrow of mountains, in the pulse of rivers, in the geometry of stars. Their silence calls to those who listen, and some still do. In the chapters ahead, their stories will rise again, each giant remembered by name and deed, each echo unfolding into its own world. The age of beginnings has passed. The age of remembrance begins. Before the alphabet had voice, there was Uruk, the city of light and dust. Its walls shimmered under an infant sun, and its people moved in rhythm with the newborn rivers. Upon its throne sat Gilgamesh, 2/3 god, 1/3 man. His gaze was too heavy for the world he ruled. He built higher, walked farther, seeking a silence large enough to contain his name. Beyond his kingdom stretched the cedar forest, where no mortal axe had sung. It was said that a guardian dwelled there, woven from storm and flame, a creature older than sin, older than mercy. Humbaba. His breath scorched leaves to ash, his roar bent mountains. He guarded the living wood not from men, but from the hunger of time itself. None who entered returned unchanged. Restlessness drove Gilgamesh to challenge the sacred. With Enkidu, his wild twin, he journeyed for days under bleeding suns. The sands hissed beneath their feet like whispering serpents. Each night they dreamed of voices older than gods. The stars seemed nearer there, and crueler. At the forest's edge, the air grew sweet and electric, as though creation itself were listening. Humbaba emerged from the cedars as thunder takes form. His face burned with shifting fire. His laughter shook the sky. The battle was not war, but dialogue. Axe against root, ambition against order. The forest wailed as if the world were being cut anew. When the guardian fell, the wind died. Even the gods turned their eyes away, unwilling to watch what had been unmade. The forest bled resin like tears. Its scent followed Gilgamesh home. He carried cedar beams for his temples, trophies for his walls. Yet the wood spoke in dreams, reminding him that victory and desecration are twins. The songs of Uruk praised him, but his heart remained a wound that sang back. Humbaba's fire had not been extinguished, it had moved inside him. He built monuments that touched the clouds, thinking height might buy forgiveness. But the higher his towers rose, the smaller he felt. The gods granted him fame, but denied him peace. He wandered deserts and mountains, seeking immortality, finding only echoes. Humbaba's dying gaze had told him the secret he could not bear, that every conqueror becomes what he conquers. So Gilgamesh's name endured, not as tyrant or hero, but as memory incarnate, the first mortal to measure himself against the infinite. The forest returned in time, its silence thick with forgiveness. The people forgot its guardian's name, yet remembered the tremor of awe. Thus began the human inheritance, to build from the ruins of wonder, to call it progress, and to dream of giants. Before history wore a crown, the Sumerians spoke of kings whose thrones predated the flood. They came from the sky, luminous as dawn, and ruled for spans longer than rivers flow. Their names, Alulim, Alangar, Enmenluana, were prayers carved in clay. They governed not just people, but balance itself, teaching the first cities to mirror the order of the heavens. In Eridu, the oldest city, temples rose from the marsh like mountains remembering flight. The kings built with rhythm, aligning ziggurats to stars, their measurements echoing divine geometry. Each brick bore a mark, a covenant between heaven and soil. Their reigns stretched across tens of millennia, and yet the clay tablets say, time itself obeyed them. When pride began to weigh upon creation, The rivers grew restless. The flood came not as punishment, but as release, a cleansing breath through the lungs of the world. The divine kings vanished beneath its silver skin, and humanity awoke smaller, lighter, forgetful. Only fragments of their wisdom survived. Music, mathematics, the yearning for permanence. The people of Ur and Lagash whispered that those kings still sleep beneath the waters, dreaming the foundations of civilization anew. Each invention, wheel, plough, poem, is a ripple in their eternal rest. Their temples may have crumbled, but their pattern remains. Wherever we build upward, as if reaching for memory rather than sky. Some scholars call their reigns allegory, exaggeration, myth. Yet to deny them is to deny humanity's instinct to remember large. The king list was not history, but inheritance, the story of how mortals learned to act like gods. The divine rulers became myth, and myth became blueprint. Through them, the Sumerians taught the world that greatness is geometry, shaped by longing. Even now, Eridu sleeps beneath sand, its outlines visible only from above. To walk there is to feel the ghost of structure, the symmetry of vanished divinity. Archaeologists dig for evidence, poets dig for meaning. Both find only echoes of a truth too vast for language. That once humanity did not merely pray to the heavens, it imitated them. And so, when the flood receded, mortals began again. They built smaller walls, shorter towers, but the memory of scale remained. Every kingdom since has carried the same quiet madness, the wish to outlast the sea, to measure eternity in bricks. The divine rulers may have drowned, but they left us their most dangerous gift, the dream of forever. Before Olympus crowned the world, the Titans ruled, a generation of endless horizon. They were the bones of existence, the first syllables of order. Cronus, youngest among them, rose from rebellion, wielding his mother's scythe to wound the sky. From the blood of that wound, both gods and monsters were born. Creation, it seemed, required a scream. Cronus severed father from heaven, ending tyranny, but birthing fear. He built the golden age, where no one knew hunger or pain. Yet prophecy followed him like a shadow. One day, his children would overthrow him. Terrified, he devoured them whole, swallowing the future to preserve the present. His love was consumption, his reign a pause before consequence. But Rhea, his queen, deceived him. She hid the youngest child, Zeus, in a cave, feeding Cronus a stone wrapped in cloth. The child grew in thunder and secrecy, learning that patience is the weapon of gods. When he rose, he freed his siblings, and war ignited across heaven. Titans and Olympians clashed, and the world trembled with inheritance. For 10 years, the Titanomachy raged, mountains hurled, seas inverted. Zeus struck with lightning forged in the Cyclopes' forges, while Cronus's kin fell, roaring into the abyss. When it ended, the Titans were buried in Tartarus, chained not by iron, but by memory. Their echoes became earthquakes, their sighs volcanoes. The age of law replaced the age of magnitude. Yet even the gods built their thrones upon Titan bones. Olympus itself stands on the corpses of its creators. The Greeks remembered this uneasily. Their myths shimmered with guilt, disguised as triumph. Every empire since has repeated that pattern. Conquerors, standing on the ruins of those who gave them shape, declaring the debris divine. Cronus sleeps still, they say, dreaming of the golden age he lost. The Romans renamed him Saturn, softening terror into time. Each harvest festival, they fed his memory, pretending it was peace. But beneath their laughter, Saturn waited, reminding humanity that all ages of light begin with rebellion, and all thrones tremble beneath the weight of inheritance. The Titans are not gone. They are the fault lines of the earth. Their story endures in the rumble of tectonic plates, in every uprising against Father or God. The universe, born from their war, still vibrates with their defiance. Their punishment is eternity's secret, to be forgotten by name, but remembered in structure. From the blood of the fallen sky, spilled upon Gaia's skin, the Gigantes rose, beings of fire-veined flesh, crowned with serpents. They did not seek dominion, but justice, believing the new gods had stolen too much of creation. Their rebellion was not greed, but grief, the cry of the earth reclaiming its voice after being silenced by order. They stormed Olympus, tearing trees from roots, flinging mountains like pebbles. The heavens roared, the seas fled their shores. Yet even as Zeus's lightning fell, some giants smiled, knowing that destruction was only half the story. When they fell, their blood seeded volcanoes, and the land itself became their grave and legacy. The planet's pulse was born from their failure. Their kin, the Cyclopes, worked in shadow, smiths of thunder, single-eyed visionaries of craft. From their forges beneath Etna came lightning bolts and divine tridents, tools of gods who would later enslave them. They were creators punished for creation, artisans of power too pure for politics. In every spark of invention, a Cyclops' hammer still rings. Imprisoned within volcanoes, they forged not in chains but in rhythm. Fire was their gospel, metal their prayer. Humanity inherited their art, but not their balance, wielding fire without reverence. When lightning strikes or machines roar, the old forges awaken. The Cyclopes remembering the joy and sorrow of giving fire to those who would call it divine. The Gigantes, buried beneath the earth, became its heartbeat. Enceladus lies under Sicily, his breath rising through Etna's flame. The people say earthquakes are the turning of his shoulders, restless in defeat. Science calls it tectonics. Myth calls it movement. Both are true. The planet's stability is built upon sleeping rebellion. Even the gods cannot unmake what was made in sincerity. The Cyclopes' craft and the Gigantes' courage remain. The twin pillars of civilization, creativity and defiance. Every artist, every rebel is their descendant. Humanity's progress is but their fire refined, their roar made articulate. The myths do not mourn them, they revere their persistence. For the world was never meant to be still. Beneath every mountain, a memory stirs. The Gigantes were not evil, they were necessary. Without them, the earth would be silent, and silence is the only true death. The gods won, but the giants endure. Before Britain had kings, before it had a name, it was called Albion, the land of mist and marrow. Giants ruled its cliffs, herding rivers, shaping valleys with their hands. Their laughter carried in the wind, their footprints filled with lakes. To them the island was alive, and they, its guardians. No ship had yet dared its fog-shrouded shore. Then came Brutus of Troy, exiled from his fallen homeland, seeking a new beginning. His fleet arrived under crimson skies. Upon the cliffs stood the giants, their eyes pale with sorrow and defiance. Their leader, Gog-magog, towered above them, muscles like carved granite, heart old as stone. He did not roar. He waited, as all ancient things do, for mankind's inevitable hunger. The battle was cataclysm. The cliffs cracked. The sea turned red. Corineus, Brutus's champion, wrestled Gog-magog by the throat. The giant laughed even as he fell, thrown from the cliffs into the roaring ocean below. The people said his blood dyed the rocks forever white, his bones the chalk cliffs that watch over the English Channel to this day. When the tide receded, Albion belonged to men. The giants retreated into the hills, dissolving into myth. Yet their presence lingered, in standing stones aligned with the sun, in mounds that rose from the mist like sleeping backs. The island itself seemed to remember them, each forest a heartbeat, each storm a whisper of unfinished sentences. The newcomers built towns upon the giants' graves, calling them sacred. They claimed the land, but the land claimed them back, reshaping their dreams into legend. Gog-magog's name became ritual, repeated in old London processions as a symbol of conquest, though few remembered the sorrow in his eyes when he fell. The conquered always become the foundation. Even now, when fog rolls over the cliffs of Dover, fishermen speak softly, for they say the giant still moves beneath the waves. His turning stirs the tides, his sighs bring the rain. The cliffs are not stone, they are memory calcified. To walk their edge is to tread the border between history and remorse. Albion's giants are gone, yet Britain's hills keep their shapes. The very geography is a monument to their fall. The island, tamed and mapped, still beats with their presence. They were not destroyed. They became the land itself. Every empire that rises on their soil inherits their fate, to conquer wonder and call it civilization. Before calendars learned to breathe, there was only the gap, the yawning cold where worlds would one day whisper. From frost and fire's collision, Ymir woke, a mountain dreaming itself alive. His sweat birthed multitudes, and the first winds carried their names. In that hush before language, the Jötnar wandered, vast, patient, older than dawn, their shadows the scaffolding upon which reality would hang its stars. The gods arrived like sharpened weather. Odin and his brothers studied the sleeping colossus and saw not a father, but a boundary. To make a world, they would have to break a body. Their blades were not cruelty, but intention. Ymir fell like a continent slipping beneath the sea, and from the silence after his breathing, the recipe of creation finally spoke. From Ymir's flesh rose ground, from his blood, oceans, his bones stacked into mountains, his teeth and broken shards, the stones that catch our feet. They lifted his skull as a ski and set sparks inside it, stars pinned like memories. The Jötnar watched, half grief, half wonder, as their ancestor became architecture. Creation was not birth, but carpentry, holiness, a distribution of weight. The giants did not vanish. They withdrew to edges. Jotunheim, the borderlands where laws feel thin and winter sounds like prophecy. There they waited, not plotting revenge but holding a different kind of truth, that everything forged from death remembers its maker. When avalanches speak and seas argue with cliffs, the Jötnar are reminding the world of the contract it signed. Prophecy is the North's favorite season. It says the last winter will arrive without mercy, and the giants will come like a horizon folding. Fire will kiss ice again, and Ymir's scattered body will recognize itself. Ragnarok is not doom, it is reunion. The moment a world built from sacrifice returns the favor. Even endings are just ancestors reclaiming their shapes. The Norse did not hate their giants. They honored magnitude with fear and hospitality, knowing that chaos is kin if seated properly. A mountain is just a giant practicing stillness, a glacier, patience in motion. When thunder walks the fjords, old people smile and say the big ones are turning in their sleep, careful not to wake the furniture of existence. So the North remembers. The gods built a world. The giants built the gods' courage. Every timber-framed hall echoes with that bargain, order resting on bones too large to forgive forgetfulness. When the sky clears after a storm, and the air feels rinsed, that is Ymir exhaling through the seams. Creation holds, for now. But the edges are watching, and they are family. In the east, dawn is a patient teacher. There the giants do not begin as villains, but as pillars, Daityas and Asuras, siblings to gods, keepers of scale. They were luminous, articulate, irresistible. Their appetites were not gluttony, but amplitude. Where others bowed, they balanced. Where others worshipped, they negotiated. The universe needs such negotiators. Without tension, the strings of being forget their song. When gods and asuras churned the ocean of milk, the world used a mountain as a rod and a serpent as a rope. The sea answered with intoxications, poisons, jewels, goddesses, nectar. Giants drank deeply from every cup. Balance is thirsty work. The first storms learned their rhythm from those throats. The first rain was an argument. Even blessings acquire teeth when pulled from eternity. Mahabali rose among them, a king whose justice felt like rainfall, steady, restorative, everywhere. Greatness lures tests. Vishnu visited him as a dwarf with a simple wish, 3 paces of land. When granted, the trickster grew to cosmic size, striding heaven in one step, earth in the next, leaving the third to place upon Bali's head. Humility lifted him to a throne beneath the world. In these stories, giants are not errors. They are counterweights. The devas shine. The asuras insist light earn its keep. A cosmos without pushback goes brittle. So they argued, wrestled, built, and Shum shattered. Temples learned their proportions from those debates. The curve of a spire is a compromise, a treaty between the urge to ascend and the wisdom to return. Ravana, scholar and sovereign, plays Veena in this orchestra, a giant of mind as much as muscle. 10 heads for 10 disciplines, 20 arms for 20 duties, 1 ungoverned pride. He loved divinity too closely and kidnapped balance itself. His defeat was inevitable, his complexity indelible. The East keeps him in the pantheon of necessary shadows, brilliance as cautionary hymn. The monsoon remembers their footprints. Each year, the sky negotiates with the sea, and fields inherit the minutes of that meeting. Farmers pray to gods and bargain with giants, because harvest is a committee. Somewhere between thunder and blossom, a deity signs the weather with a sigh. The crops don't care about theology. They answer to equilibrium. So the East concludes gently. The universe breathes because opposites hold hands. The Asuras were not banished. They were woven into function. The gravity in ritual, seriousness in celebration, discipline in delight. To banish them would be to flatten the world. Better to bow to both horizons and let dawn teach again. Balance is not peace. It is music played well. On an island jeweled with forests and sea light, a giant studied scripture until the pages sang. Ravana, 10 heads thinking in 12 directions, 20 arms arranging empires like chess. He was born of devotion and audacity, a scholar who outgrew obedience. His palace sounded like a library in love with thunder. When he laughed, mountains forgot their seriousness. When he prayed, gods felt seen. He lifted a mountain once, not to impress, but to test whether adoration could become architecture. Shiva pressed it back with a toe. Pinned, Ravana did not curse. He composed. 1,000 hymns rose like incense from the floor of humiliation. The god smiled. This is Ravana's paradox, pride that kneels into music, defiance that translates itself into praise. Destiny prefers complicated criminals. He abducted Sita, virtue embodied, not out of lust, but as a lever in the universe's argument with imbalance. Rama pursued. The war felt operatic, each arrow an aria. When Ravana fell, the sky stood. The wind forgot its errands. 10 heads bowed, learning the last lesson. Intelligence without surrender is a ladder leaning against the wrong eternity. Funerals for giants are geography. The sea took his heat. The island kept his echoes. Festivals remember him with contradictory flowers, some for his crimes, some for his courage. Children learn he was a villain. Elders light lamps for his brilliance. The truth is a braid. Giants rarely fit inside a single verdict without breaking the furniture of judgment. He could have ruled forever if humility had been part of his curriculum. But eternity does not grant tenure to those who confuse capacity with permission. Ravana's fall redeems the word limit, turning it from insult to instrument. Limits teach music how to be song, rivers how to be rivers, kings how to be servants when the crown grows heavier than heaven. At night, in Lanka's temples, musicians still feel a presence touch their wrists, correcting a phrase, insisting on rigor. Scholars sense a footnote breathing. Devotees hear a well-tuned stubbornness ring the bell. Ravana has become a pedagogy, strong tea for weary civilizations. Drink and remember, excellence is a deity. Pride, its most persuasive priest. So his legacy resolves, a brilliant warning scored for orchestra and thunderhead. We do not cancel him, we consult him. We ask his 10 heads to edit our blueprints, then ask our one heart to choose restraint. When the Vena's final note dissolves into sea salt silence, you can almost hear him whisper to Rama across the ages, "May your victory remain teachable." In deserts where scripture keeps its breath slow and exact, another word for giant-gathered dust. Nephilim, the fallen. They were the rumor of heaven walking, the grammar of power conjugated into flesh. Mighty men of old, the text hums, reluctant to elaborate. Their existence feels like a door left ajar between thunder and genealogy, inviting the cautious to imagine what holiness can cause. The flood supposedly erased them. Floods are good at cleaning mistakes and keeping questions. Yet echoes persisted, Rephaim, Anakim, tall shadows haunting borders where promises sharpen into swords. Spies returned from Canaan with knees full of insects, saying, "We were grasshoppers beside them." Scripture records the tremble as carefully as the height, because fear is a measurement too, a human ruler held to an inhuman wall. Their names turned into coordinates. Bashan, Hebron, valleys where bones might hum if brushed. Og ruled with iron, slept in measurements instead of sheets. His bed became a museum label. Defeated, he turned from problem to proverb. The Nephilim's children shrank into stories, then metaphors, then footnotes that scholars argue like weather, forecastable, unavoidable, never actually happening when you stare. What were they? Fallen angels trying on gravity, demigods practicing ethics, kings wearing rumor like armor. The Book of Enoch stages consultations the canon declines to print. Angels teach metallurgy, adornment, astronomy, curricula too sharp for adolescents. The result is splendor without supervision, appetite with a diploma. Heaven exiles its teachers, earth inherits the syllabus and pretends it found it in a cave. The Western mind builds fences around ambiguity, but the Nephilim keep stepping over. They are the silhouette of disallowed closeness, divinity and dust negotiating marriage without a chaperone. Every cathedral remembers them with a spire. Every law code remembers them with a warning. If you listen under stained glass, you can hear a whisper. Power loves us. Please handle carefully. Archaeology finds no bodies, only behavior. Cities infatuated with height, idols sculpted like thunder taught manners. Perhaps the Nephilim never walked. Perhaps they were the world's first metaphor for scale. Metaphors leave better fossils than bones. They sediment into custom, ossify into architecture, migrate into language. The modern word for Nephilim might simply be skyscraper, a tower rehearsing the body it never had. So the scriptures close the file without closing the question. The fallen linger as grammar in our prayers, a clause of caution attached to every miracle. When we reach too far, the old names wake and look through us, checking posture. The Nephilim do not demand belief. They demand carefulness. Whatever heaven does with earth, let it keep the receipts. After the flood, a few heights remained. Among them walked Og of Bashan, king, survivor, fragment. His bed of iron measured 9 cubits by 4, proof that the age of magnitude had not quite ended. He ruled a plateau rimmed with thunder, his people the final syllables of a language almost erased. Travelers spoke of him with both fear and relief. A ghost that still kept watch. Og's strength was not cruelty, but endurance. He outlived empires, trading war for witness. When Moses came, staff in hand, the old giant met him on the borders of promise. The battle was swift, but its echo lasted centuries, an ancient scale meeting a new measure. When Og fell, the land shuddered once. as if a book had closed, sealing a chapter humanity would read only in dreams. Goliath rose generations later, a smaller echo with louder armor. Bronze flashed in the valley of Elah. Fear gathered like smoke. He was not monstrous, only confident. His voice filled the space where courage hesitates. Against him stepped a boy with no armor and an argument. The stone flew, history inhaled, and once again learned humility. The pattern repeated: strength inviting precision, arrogance teaching faith. Goliath's body fell into dust, but his shadow lengthened through kingdoms. Every duel since carries his footprint. The giant and the small, the old order and the unexpected grace. The story is less about height than about vision, seeing the difference between intimidation and truth. The stone that struck him was aimed not at his forehead, but at forgetfulness. Og and Goliath are bookends, the first and last of those who stood unapologetically tall. Their falls mark the moment humanity stopped meeting heaven halfway and started measuring itself by other means. Yet their absence made us restless. Cathedrals, cannons, towers, all attempts to replace their outline. Architecture became archaeology's way of missing them. In every museum bone and every myth retold, their footsteps linger. Scientists call it anthropology. Poets call it ache. The valley of Elah still hums under heat, and the Bashan plateau dreams of thunder. We are the descendants of their defeat, small creatures learning to carry enormous meanings without breaking. When a child skips a stone across water, count the ripples. That is the number of times the giants have risen again. We do not need their bodies, we inherit their scale. To remember Og and Goliath is to practice proportion, to face what is larger with precision, and to stand, however briefly, in the company of magnitude. Before Ireland wore green, it was grey and salt. The Fomorians were not born, but churned from the abyss, vast as storms and cold as drowned stone. Their flesh carried the memory of tides, their gaze the weight of shipwrecks. Each step was a breaking wave, each breath a gale. They ruled by unmaking, twisting beauty into ruin until the earth itself defied them by surviving. The Tuatha De Danann arrived with light, art, and symmetry, meeting storm with structure. The wars between them were weather made visible. Every lightning strike on the Atlantic coast is a syllable from that argument. Bela of the evil eye led the Fomor, his gaze a weapon that turned fertility to ash. He was grandfather to the son he would eventually face. At Mag Tuaird, the final battle cracked the island's sky. Lugh, the bright one, faced his grandfather. The spear flew. The eye closed. Balance resumed. The sea retreated respectfully. The Fomorians sank not as losers, but as anchors, ensuring the island would never drift too far from memory. Their defeat fertilized Ireland's myths. From salt, stories grew. To this day, fishermen crossing rough water whisper apologies before casting nets. They say the Fomorians still own the deep, charging toll in storms. When fog rolls in, the old ones are counting their names. The waves do not obey weather, they obey ancestry. Each harbor is a truce, each tide a conversation. The Fomorians were never evil. They were context. They reminded the island that creation is negotiation, not gift. Every field owes its greenness to a drowned giant below. Even the sun must set to honor its shadow. In this balance of storm and seed, Ireland found its soul, melancholy as rain, immortal as stone. Scholars say the Fomorians are echoes of pre-Celtic tribes, mythologized by successors. But legends refuse such autopsies. The sea does not explain itself, it repeats itself. Each wave is a resurrection of its own defeat. That is the lesson of monsters made of weather. You cannot kill what moves in circles. So the Fomorians remain, humming beneath the Atlantic, their pulse sinking with tides and tourists alike. When lightning strikes the western cliffs and the air smells of iron, someone is remembering them. The island smiles and lets it rain. Across the ocean, where volcanoes breathe like drums, the Aztecs spoke of giants called Quinametsin. They lived beneath earlier suns, each age ending in cataclysm and renewal. Their bones are the mountains, their hearts the lava still cooling. When the current sun rose, it needed blood to move. The giants had taught that truth too well. Everything bright demands a cost. They built the pyramids before humans could count their own shadows. Stones the weight of time stacked with mathematical grace. Later peoples found these structures and assumed gods had left their calling cards. But the Aztecs knew. Those were not shrines, they were seed vaults for eternity, designed to outlast regret. When the sun called for a new beginning, the Quinametsin resisted. They had seen too many worlds rise and collapse. Resistance is a form of memory. But the sky is impatient. Lightning fell like axes, and the giants crumbled into topography. The people of the fifth sun walk on their backs now, building cities on spines they no longer recognize. Volcanic valleys are their breathing holes. Each eruption is a giant clearing its throat, reminding creation that permanence is a myth. Archaeologists label layers. The earth labels eras by who remembered to look up while burning. The pyramids stand not as monuments, but as metronomes for cosmic time. In myth, Quetzalcoatl rescued humanity from their bones, mixing giant dust with his own blood to sculpt smaller versions of ambition. That is the origin of mortality, a compromise between scale and safety. We became manageable, but the memory of magnitude survived in architecture. Every temple is an apology for shrinkage. Scholars trace these legends to fossils, to volcanic dwarfs, to psychology. But locals still hear footsteps in earthquakes. The soil remembers density better than paper. When a pyramid casts a shadow exactly aligned with a star, it's because the Quinametsin still measure from below, correcting our geometry with gravity's pen. Thus the Mexica prayed for balance, not safety. They knew each sun ends in fire and each civilization in forgetting. The giants were not warnings but templates. They taught that to build is to risk rebirth. And perhaps the next sun, when it rises, will find us worthy to be large again. Finally, we come to the mute evidence, stones that fit too well for their century. At Baalbek, blocks weighing 1,000 tons rest as casually as tablets. In Peru, walls of Sacsayhuaman interlock like puzzles solved by gravity itself. On England's plain, Stonehenge circles the sky's clock with the accuracy of reverence. No giants stand near, yet their signature remains. Archaeologists describe methods, ramps, levers, labor. Believers describe memories, giants, visitors, forgotten sciences. Both stories serve the same instinct, refusing to believe ordinary hands built wonder. We suspect the extraordinary because we remember it too fondly. Mystery is the currency that keeps awe in circulation. The stones have no language, but they speak geometry. Their angles whisper of a planet once measured from the moon's shadow. Their mass says, belief once had muscles. Every era translates them differently. Romans saw temples, Incas saw fortresses, tourists see content. The truth sits patiently beneath tripod legs and selfies, still too large to edit. Legends claim the builders were half angel, half engineer. They moved stone by song, lifting weight with frequency. Perhaps this is poetic physics. Sound does move matter. Faith does move men. Somewhere between chant and chisel, truth vibrates. The walls endure because they were built in harmony, not haste. When night covers Baalbek, the columns glow as if lit from within. In Peru, lightning maps the old circuit lines between stones. At Stonehenge, solstice crowds gather, their breath fogging the air like incipient myth. We build bonfires to simulate memory, pretending we still understand the conversation between sky and granite. Science explains construction, yet admits the motive remains mysterious. Why such precision? Why this dialogue with heaven? Perhaps because the builders felt small and wanted to speak up. Perhaps because they remembered the giants not as creatures, but as ambitions. A civilization without awe is a wall without foundation. So the stones wait. Tourists leave. Stars stay. Wind erases the footprints, but not the impulse. The nameless builders left no scripture because they built their prayer in rock. Every century adds its own question mark to their period. In the long grammar of time, their silence remains the most articulate answer. When the age of myth ended, the earth remained suspiciously quiet. Then men began to dig. Shovels turned soil that had once been sanctuary, and from the darkness rose fragments, massive femurs, teeth the size of fists. Farmers stared, priests blessed, scientists measured. The ground became a library no one had catalogued. In Tennessee, in Sardinia, in the high plateaus of Asia, bones appeared where stories slept. Newspapers printed sketches of titans exhumed. Photographs followed, grainy and magnetic. For a heartbeat of centuries, the impossible looked plausible. Then the institutions arrived, labeling, storing, or denying. Knowledge wears many masks. Censorship is only one of them. The Smithsonian was said to keep vaults of silence. Skeptics dismissed the rumors, yet no one could produce the missing bones. Perhaps they crumbled. Perhaps they were never there. Perhaps the need for giants is so persistent that absence itself became artifact, proof through yearning. Archaeology bloomed. Every mound became a suspect, every skull a potential confession. Yet carbon and context whispered smaller stories. Mammoths, mastodons, whales mistaken for men. The myth contracted, but did not die. Awe is resistant to correction. It changes vocabulary instead. Photographs multiplied. Farmers beside skulls too large for plausibility. Trenches filled with arranged bones. Many were fakes, printed to sell wonder by the inch. but some defied dismissal. In the blurred line between discovery and design, imagination found its laboratory. Mythology outsourced to photography what scripture once handled in poetry. Explorers chased the rumor across deserts and jungles. Sardinia's caves yielded elongated skulls, Nevada's dunes, strange red-haired mummies. Each revelation dissolved under scrutiny, but the excitement refused to stay buried. Humanity, it seemed, preferred the possibility of giants to the certainty of explanation. Science, precise yet patient, looked deeper into DNA, strata, isotopes. It found no species of men that large. Instead, it found the human mind's appetite for pattern. The same need that paints faces in clouds also sculpts ancestors in stone. We are biologically storytellers, neurons addicted to coherence. And yet, beneath every debunking lives a whisper. If myths across continents tell the same story, what collective nerve are they touching? Why do cultures with no contact remember enormous teachers, builders, destroyers? Is this mere coincidence, or a fossil of shared perception, an echo in genetic memory? Some scholars propose ancestral imagination, a cognitive fossil from times when megafauna towered and early humans learned reverence. The bones of mammoths may have birthed our gods. Others suspect symbolism, giants as metaphors for climate, mountains, pride. All plausible. None complete. In remote villages, elders tell the story differently. They say bones dislike museums. They prefer to sleep. Disturb them, and the land retaliates. Storms, sinkholes, accidents. The old respect for scale lingers like an instinct, the urge to bow before magnitude, even if it's buried. Meanwhile, technology revived curiosity. LiDAR pierced jungles, sonar scanned lakes, satellites mapped forgotten cities aligned to solstices. Patterns emerged, impossible alignments, megalithic geometries. The data suggested intention larger than convenience. The line between myth and archaeology blurred again, this time lit by algorithms instead of torches. Paleontologists joined reluctantly, showing how bone compresses, how soil lies. Yet many privately admit, Earth still surprises. In a Siberian pit, a femur thicker than reason. In Africa, footprints too old for comfort. Each anomaly reopens the file. Science doesn't destroy mystery, it domesticates it. The giants persist now as equations, extinct megafauna, geological epochs, statistical improbabilities. We have translated them into metrics, and still they hum. Awe is bilingual. It speaks both Latin taxonomy and whispered prayer. The two dialects argue, but never divorce. The modern seeker stands with drone and notebook, half archaeologist, half poet. He films dust motes, calls them evidence. She measures ruins and hears heartbeat. The instruments have changed, but the gesture is ancient, the reaching into dirt for reassurance that we came from something enormous and kind. Perhaps that's the secret. The giants are mirrors, scaled to our desire for belonging. Every civilization creates its own predecessors, taller, wiser, conveniently vanished. They legitimize us the way mountains legitimize valleys. Without something greater to follow, history would feel self-invented, and that would be unbearable. Still, some keep searching. In archives, in deserts, in the spaces between faith and data. Each shovel stroke is an act of humility, each doubt a prayer in disguise. The earth answers rarely, but when it does, even a pebble feels monumental. Science kneels beside scripture, both dust-covered and sincere. Between them lies the territory of wonder, the soil from which curiosity grows. The rumor of bones is not proof of giants, it's proof of hope. Humanity keeps digging because meaning might yet have a skeleton. Night gathers the dust of ages and folds it into silence. The world sleeps beneath its own questions, dreaming of what it once knew. The giants are gone, yet their echo lingers, in thunder, in thought, in the slow pulse of remembering. Their absence is a presence that teaches stillness. The earth no longer speaks in riddles, only in patience. We dig for proof and uncover reflection. We lift stones and find our own shadows beneath them. Knowledge is not ascent, but return, a long journey back to wonder. Even the stars, once distant, now feel like thoughts looking homeward. Perhaps the giants were never creatures, but conditions of the world, moments when creation remembered its size. We walk in their afterglow, carrying their vastness as inheritance. Every heartbeat is an echo of their stride. Every question, a fragment of their speech. Truth was never buried. It has always been the trembling between knowing and awe. The giants did not vanish. They became the measure of how far imagination can reach before it bows. To remember them is not to believe, but to listen. So let the myths rest, and let the silence speak. The ancient rhythm continues beneath all progress, beneath all proof. The world turns as it always has, carved by wonder, watched by stars, carried by stories too large for their tellers. And in that turning, the echo endures, not of bone, but of meaning. What was once colossal still walks within us. The age of giants never ended. It only changed its name.